defendant has requested to use the name Saul Goodman. So, it's United States versus Saul Goodman.
Hey guys, Kiwi here, warning of spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul. In this video, I'll be breaking down and reviewing episode 613, the series finale of Better Call Saul. Like the video if you end up enjoying it, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter for more Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad content. With that being said, let's jump into the breakdown. Going into this episode, I wondered if Gene was going to be able to make it to his house and retrieve his shoebox in time, and he just barely manages to do so, with cops already waiting outside due to Marion being able to spell out his license plate as he drove away. It's hilarious how Gene's shoebox and his diamonds had such a huge emphasis on them throughout the show, when in reality they were just accidentally dumped all over the inside of a dumpster left there once Gene was arrested. It's horrible to think that Gene's diamonds and all of his mementos from his past were lost at the bottom of a dumpster, never to be seen again. I do wonder if the cops ever searched the dumpster that he was hiding in, considering how the security camera that caught him jumping into the dumpster in the first place would have most likely seen that he had a shoebox with him. Since the contents of the shoebox or the diamonds are never brought up for the rest of the episode, I assume that his shoebox, mementos, and diamonds were left there to be dumped into a garbage truck and eventually a landfill, which kind of makes me think of that one news story, the guy who's searching for a hard drive he lost in a landfill with millions of crypto on it. Also, viewers mentioned to me the parallel of Gene being arrested in the dumpster to seeing the Saul Goodman cutout thrown into the dumpster in the 601 cold open. This is great foreshadowing, whether it was even intentional or not. So the thing that's absolutely crazy to me is that Gene is only on the run for like 5 minutes of screen time. Most shows would have made this the majority of the episode, but including the runtime of the Bagman flashback, Gene is in jail just like 11 minutes into the episode. This made it feel like my expectations were totally subverted and in a great way, with the rest of the episode being a mystery. Since the episode is extended, I was extremely excited to see what the next hour had in store since Gene got caught so early on in the episode. I do like how once Gene is in the jail cell, he has a moment of self-realization where he just says over and over again, "This is how they get you."
This is how they get you. This is how they get you. Jesus. What were you thinking?
It really felt like reality hitting him like a ton of bricks, because one part of Gene almost wanted to get caught, as we saw him pushing the envelope time and time again in previous episodes, such as going back to con with Jeff and Buddy, along with breaking into the house during episodes 11 and 12, followed by not leaving when he should have. The other part of Gene definitely didn't want to get caught, but he kept getting in his own way and ultimately was the cause of his own capture. He has no one to blame but himself, since he started making such rash decisions after his upsetting phone call with Kim. The cops blatantly watching the Saul Goodman commercial in the other room feels like it brings shame to Gene. That's just the thing, he was always locally infamous in Albuquerque as Saul, but now he's infamous nationwide after becoming a well-known criminal. I draw a parallel between the cops staring at him while watching his commercial to his bus scene at the end of the episode, where Saul's past is shoved in his face when he doesn't want it to be, while seeing everyone around him react to it. Although Gene didn't seem happy that the cops were watching his commercial in front of him near the beginning of the episode, along with trying to shrug off his identity to his fellow inmates, I do like how he smiles at the end of the bus scene, accepting his past now that he knows his fellow inmates accept and approve of who he used to be. I love how Gene also transforms back into his former personas throughout the duration of the final episode. Peter Gould gave out a piece of script for a Rolling Stone interview, and the script says, as a fugitive, he was playing a game he didn't know, but now he's in the system, he has superpowers. So when Gene turns back into Saul, he manages to get his 30-year deal down to 7.5 years, which is absolutely wild. It's like one final I still got it moment as he works the system to his advantage. When Saul plays the victim card in front of Marie and the prosecutor during his plea deal meeting, they can tell that it's an act and that Saul is playing the sympathy and victim cards on purpose to win the jury over. They ask Saul if he thinks that the jury's gonna buy it, but Saul says how he only needs one to. I love how in this moment the act drops and sinister music starts playing as Saul removes his sympathetic mask and reveals his true attitude towards the situation.
Oakley tells me that you've never lost a case. Is that so? Hell of a record. Should be proud of that. Still, juries, right? You never can tell. It's a roll of the dice.
Saul's angle is that he knows how to get into the prosecutor's head and psych him out about keeping his perfect streak, about never losing a case, as the prosecutor doesn't want to ruin that streak. It's also interesting to point out how the one juror that Saul wants to convince by the end of all of this is Kim, as he threw everything away in court in order to try and win her back by showing that Jimmy McGill still exists.
And you think jurors are gonna buy that?
One. All I need is one.
By the end of the plea negotiations, he's told that Kim has already confessed about Howard, which is when I think he starts transforming back into Jimmy. Although he beat the system and knocked down his sentence to 7.5 years, it rings hollow to him since he still has the weight of everything that's happened throughout his past on his shoulders. Peter Gould put it into words excellently during an interview by saying how it feels empty because he knows in his heart he could do better. Not better in terms of his sentence, but better in terms of himself. And then the ice cream that he asked for is just a ridiculous reward. And that's because he doesn't really care about the ice cream after all. He just brought up the stuff with Howard to get Kim to go to his court date. Now when he's on the plane back to Albuquerque, he starts creating a plan to get Kim to show up to his trial by making up a bunch of new info about Howard's death. I love how Jimmy uses this to confess everything that he can in court and in front of Kim, effectively killing Saul Goodman by getting everything off his chest that he's been bottling up for the entirety of both shows. When he breaks about helping Walt to get where he was, it felt like one final hoorah for Saul, but then when he starts talking about Howard and Chuck, he's definitely reverted back to Jimmy, or James McGill rather, as he tells the court before he finally sits down. Then once again referencing what Peter Gould said during an interview, he walks into the courtroom as Saul and leaves as Jimmy. Although it may be impossible for him to fully redeem himself, he does manage to recover his soul, which is an excellent perspective to have on the whole thing. Throughout the entire show, Jimmy's been compartmentalizing each traumatic experience he goes through by putting on the mask that are his former personas. I think it's great that by the end of the series he finally owns up to his actions with the self-awareness that he could have always had but chose not to for so long. Although I do love how Jimmy throws it all away to admit the truth, I do see how some viewers would find it frustrating that he completely ruined his 7.5-year deal. However, it lines up perfectly with the trend of this character always getting in the way of himself, and it truly is a bittersweet ending in my opinion. A 7.5-year sentence would have been too short to end the series on. It does suck how he ended up getting 86 years, but it was great to see him finally get everything off his chest and revert back to Jimmy. I'm happy that some justice was brought to Chuck's legacy, and that Jimmy finally admitted the truth about the malpractice insurance. We then see how Jimmy is now working in the prison kitchen, which parallels his job to Cinnabon extremely well. Being in hiding as Gene was ironically even more of a prison for him than being in prison itself, as he hated having to isolate himself day in and day out while just going through the motions. He may actually be happier in prison now that he's able to get everything off his chest that he's been compartmentalizing all these years, along with the fact that the bus scene implies how his fellow inmates respect him for who he truly is. I love how the three main characters of this universe all get different endings. Walt dies, Jesse escapes under a different identity, and Jimmy goes to prison. And then there's Kim as the pseudo fourth main character, who gets to live freely without having to escape under a new identity, but has to come to terms with her past and learn how to move on and live the best life that she can, whatever she has left. The final few scenes with Jimmy and Kim are absolutely brilliant as well. I love how Kim calls him Jimmy, since she knows that he has reverted back to the Jimmy that she once knew during the trial. I also loved seeing Jimmy and Kim share one final cigarette together, followed by Jimmy giving Kim the finger guns as she leaves, calling back to the season 4 and season 5 finales as their final scenes together for each season respectively. Apparently they filmed Kim giving the finger guns back, but cut it due to it feeling like it implied too much that Kim wanted to potentially go back to conning and scheming. Personally, I'm happy that we only see Jimmy do it, while Kim just looks over her shoulder back at him as she walks away. It's a great conclusion to the series. It wraps a bow nicely on everything, but it leaves it open-ended just enough in case the creators ever want to revisit this universe. And then we gotta talk about Bill Oakley for a moment, because he does a great job in the final episode.
I'd like to petition to withdraw from this case.
Denied.
Respectfully,
Not a chance.
I wasn't sure what other characters we'd get to see in the series finale, but I gotta admit, Oakley was a perfect pick. The fact that Francesca mentioned how Oakley switched from a prosecutor to a defense lawyer was originally just thought of as a nod towards the character, but now in hindsight after the finale, it was clearly foreshadowing how Oakley would be helping Saul in his defense. And then there's all the flashbacks and cameo appearances that we get throughout the episode, which I will be discussing more in depth in a video following this review in the next few days. So although I'll be talking about them more in the future, it feels necessary to at least mention them here in this review since they're such a major part of the episode. I love how the final cold open to the show takes us back to 508 Bagman with Mike and Jimmy. I didn't expect to see Mike again after the 611 scene, so it was an absolute pleasure to see him open up to Jimmy out in the desert after everything they've been through.
December 8, 2001.
Why?
No. March 17th, 1984. Day I took my first bribe.
The Marie cameo was equally surprising as it was fitting to the end of the show. I'm surprised that we saw her over, say, Skylar, but we already got some minor closure with Skylar after Francesca told Jean that she had taken the deal, implying that the authorities were able to track down and find the bodies of Hank and Gomez, which set up this Marie cameo brilliantly. Although I love Marie's actor, I never was the biggest fan of Marie the character throughout Breaking Bad. That being said, seeing her in the Better Call Saul finale included possibly the best work that she's ever done as Marie.
They were shot dead and left in a hole in the desert. And you helped the two-faced, poisonous bastard behind it all.
I love how we saw more of Saul and Walt talking during their time in Granite State, something that I've predicted for a while now ever since I created that Walt and Jesse theories video for Better Call Saul earlier this year, before their cameos were even confirmed. Bryan Cranston did an amazing job slipping back into the role as Walt.
Oh, Christ, are you kidding me? Stay in your lane.
It's hilarious seeing how much of an a-hole Walt is towards Saul during these moments, even after they open up to each other. Walt telling Saul, "So you've always been like this," is such a stinger to him, as it feels like the same perspective that Chuck used to have towards him, even though it wasn't necessarily true. Then there's the Chuck cameo itself, which was as brilliant as it was short and sweet. I've wanted a Chuck cameo all season long, especially since we never saw him in season 5. I'm extremely happy that we got to see Chuck one final time, and it's interesting how the roles of Chuck and Jimmy feel swapped. Normally, Jimmy's the one who wants to have a heart-to-heart convo with Chuck brushing him off, but this time it was the other way around. I agree with Michael McKean once said that having too many Chuck flashbacks would have weakened the impact of his death, but in my opinion, this final flashback fits just right, especially with it being the final episode of the show. It truly gives a great conclusion to the Chuck versus Jimmy dynamic that I've always wanted.
Well, you could stay for a while. We could talk.
Talk? What about?
The show always started with Jimmy and Chuck and their dynamic, so it's great how the show ends by giving a subtle nod towards it, not only by seeing Chuck in the flesh, but also by Jimmy admitting how he ruined Chuck's malpractice insurance while in court. So I'm gonna give this episode an easy S tier. I love how the series concluded. I was on the edge of my seat the whole episode, not only due to knowing it was the final time I'd ever see a new episode of Better Call Saul for the first time, but also because of how intrigued and immersed I was in the story to see how Jimmy's character concluded with what fate he'd get by the end of the episode. When you look at my current season 6 tier list, just seeing how many episodes are an S and A tier are just a testament to how strong this series has ended. It's usually really hard for shows to end strong in a way that wraps up the story nicely along with satisfying fans, but this is an issue that Breaking Bad never had, and now Better Call Saul follows in its footsteps quite well. I really loved season 5 of Better Call Saul, and it's crazy how amazing season 6 has been as well. Just like with Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul has gotten better and better up until the very end. So although the ending of Better Call Saul is bittersweet, it's not so tragic and depressing that it would make rewatching the show a total downer. Although it is tragic watching earlier seasons knowing where Jimmy and Kim end up, it's satisfying enough of an ending that I will extremely enjoy rewatches in the future. What do you think about the series finale to Better Call Saul? Let me know in the comments and check back on the channel soon for more Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad content. Speaking of which, I'll do a channel update in the near future letting you all know what kind of content I have planned now that Better Call Saul is over, but needless to say, there's still a lot to talk about with both these shows, and I'm excited to talk a lot more about Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad now that the universe has concluded for now. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today. If you're new to the channel, just haven't yet already, subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay updated on when I post new content on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Check out my Patreon or give a super thanks to help support the channel financially. But most importantly, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
So you were always like this?
The name's McGill. I'm James McGill.